Behind the cold, echoing walls of Buckingham Palace, where power and glory were meant to reign supreme, a story of love and devastating loss unfolded, one that would bring the mightiest queen to her knees. She was the most powerful woman of the 19th century, ruling over an empire on which the sun never set. Yet behind the glittering crown, Queen Victoria's heart belonged to only one man, Prince Albert. Then, on a dark winter's day, fate struck mercilessly, ripping her soulmate from her arms and plunging the radiant queen into a lifetime of mourning. For nearly 40 years, the widow of Windsor would live in the shadow of grief, her love immortalized by pain. This is a tale of love, loss, and the unending sorrow of a queen. Chapter 1: The Young Queen and the Man Who Stole Her Heart. The year was 1837, and the air in London carried a restless anticipation. A girl of just 18 had ascended the throne of the British Empire. Her name whispered in awe and doubt alike: Victoria. The weight of a crown rested upon her head, heavier than she could ever have imagined, and yet her eyes still held the innocence of someone barely grown. Ministers, noblemen, and an entire empire watched her every step, expecting the untested queen to either rise to glory or falter under the crushing burden of power. Inside Buckingham Palace, life was a delicate balance of ceremony and solitude. The new queen was surrounded by advisors, courtiers, and endless expectations, but she was still achingly alone. She spent evenings pacing the gilded halls, the distant echo of her footsteps mingling with the whispers of history. The portraits of past monarchs stared down at her, cold and judging. She could not confide in them. She could not ask for comfort. A queen, she was learning, is both the most admired and the most isolated soul in her realm. Then came the day he arrived. Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, a young man of 20, with dark, soulful eyes and a reserved, thoughtful manner, entered her world like a quiet storm. He was not a conquering general or a boisterous aristocrat. He carried no aura of arrogance, only the soft gravity of someone who understood her without words. From the first glance, something within Victoria shifted. Their meeting was a dance of subtle glances and hesitant words. The world saw a formal introduction. She felt the spark of destiny. Albert's presence was unlike anyone she had ever known. He did not bow and tremble before her crown. He looked into her eyes and spoke to the woman behind it. For the first time, Victoria felt seen, not as a queen, but as herself. In the days that followed, he became a constant in her mind. Every step through the palace gardens, every dinner under the grand chandeliers, every quiet evening in the royal study was colored by the anticipation of his company. His voice, soft but certain, became her anchor amid the swirling storms of court politics. Soon, the formalities of monarchy gave way to something far more fragile and powerful: love. In letters to her closest confidants, Victoria wrote of him with a joy that could barely be contained. "He is perfection," she confessed. "I never knew I could feel this way." When she proposed to him, a bold move for a queen bound by tradition, the moment became the first step into a life she had only dared to dream of. Their wedding in 1840 was not just a spectacle for the world, it was the union of two hearts that had found in each other the rarest of treasures, a love unshaken by crowns or courts. In the years that followed, Buckingham Palace transformed. The cold echo of marble and gilded halls warmed with laughter and music. Children's cries filled the corridors as Victoria and Albert built a family together. 9 children who would carry the legacy of their love across Europe. He was more than a husband. He was her confidant, her advisor, her shield. Where she burned with impulsive emotion, he was calm and deliberate. Together, they were unshakable. But even in those golden years, shadows lingered. Victoria often found herself gripped by an unspoken fear during the quiet of night. That happiness, this profound, could not last forever. She would watch Albert reading by the fire, his face serene in the flickering glow, and a chill would run through her. Time, she knew, was a cruel and silent predator. The world, however, saw only splendor. A queen at the height of her youth, a marriage that seemed ordained by fate, and an empire flourishing under her reign. Yet history, ever patient, was already weaving the threads of tragedy that would one day unravel this perfect world. For in the shadows of the palace, fate had begun its slow, merciless approach. Chapter 2. The Shadow of Tragedy. The winter of 1861 crept over England like a silent thief. A fog heavier than usual wrapped itself around London, swallowing the city's gas lamps and dimming the very heart of the empire. Inside Windsor Castle, the fires burned high, yet a chill lingered in the corridors, a chill that no warmth could chase away. Prince Albert had grown pale. It began with a quiet fatigue, the kind a man might dismiss after years of devotion to his duties. He had always carried the weight of more than just a family. He bore the conscience of an empire, endless state papers, diplomatic meetings, the unrelenting expectations of being the Queen's anchor. These things wore him down in silence. But now the silence had turned ominous. At first, it was a lingering cough, a pallor to his skin, and nights spent shivering despite the heat of the fire. Victoria noticed every change with a wife's instinct and a queen's terror. She clutched his hand at dinner, her eyes searching his face for reassurance. He smiled for her sake, but the shadows beneath his eyes betrayed the truth. "Albert, you are not well," she whispered one evening, her voice breaking in the candlelit room. "It is nothing, dearest," he murmured, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "A touch of the season, no more." But the season was merciless. Days turned into weeks, and Albert's strength waned. Doctors were summoned from across the kingdom, their carriages rushing through the frost-covered streets to the castle gates. They spoke in cautious tones of typhoid fever, of inflammation, of the body's betrayal. Their whispered consultations in the corridors filled the palace with dread. Victoria refused to leave his side. She slept in a chair by his bed, her gown rumpled, her crown forgotten. The queen of the world became simply a wife, desperate and powerless. She read to him in the soft hours of the night, her voice trembling as she tried to believe he could hear her through the haze of fever. "You must not leave me, Albert," she whispered when they were alone, her tears falling onto his cold hand. "I cannot be without you. I will not." Albert, even in his weakness, tried to comfort her. He spoke of the children, of the country, of duty, but never of fear. He knew, perhaps more than she, that death had begun to circle. The castle became a world of hushed footsteps and echoing prayers. Servants tiptoed through hallways, heavy with despair. Outside, the empire continued its daily rhythm, unaware that the heart of its queen was breaking in real time. One evening, As the December wind howled against the windows, Victoria walked to the chapel alone. She knelt on the cold stone floor, hands clasped so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her whispered prayer was not for the empire, not for the crown, but for the man she loved beyond all reason. Take my crown, my throne, my life if you must, she begged the silence, but leave me my Albert. The silence answered only with the groan of the wind through the ancient castle walls. In the days that followed, Albert drifted in and out of consciousness. His once strong voice became a faint whisper, his hand light as air in hers. Victoria's world began to fracture with every labored breath he took. She could not imagine a tomorrow without him, could not fathom the echo of the palace halls without his steady presence. And yet, deep within her heart, she felt it. The shadow of tragedy was no longer approaching. It was already here. Chapter 3. The Night the World Went Silent. December 14th, 1861. The castle was wrapped in a suffocating stillness, broken only by the distant howl of the winter wind. Inside Prince Albert's chamber, the fire crackled weakly, shadows flickering against the walls like restless spirits. Queen Victoria sat at his bedside, her fingers entwined with his, her face pale from nights without sleep. Albert's breathing had become shallow, uneven, like the tide pulling away from the shore. Every rise and fall of his chest was a battle. The doctors hovered nearby, their expressions grave, speaking only in whispers, as if raising their voices might hasten the inevitable. Albert, my love. Victoria's voice trembled. She leaned close, brushing her lips against his damp forehead. You must fight. Do not leave me. His eyelids fluttered open, revealing eyes that had once held steady warmth, but now flickered like fading lanterns. My dearest, he whispered, his German accent soft, barely audible. You must be strong. The words tore through her like glass. She shook her head, tears spilling freely now, unbefitting a queen, but true to a wife in despair. I cannot, not without you. Albert's gaze lingered on her for a long moment, full of a love that transcended the fragile body it inhabited. His hand twitched weakly in hers, a final effort to comfort the woman who had ruled an empire, yet whose heart he ruled completely. Outside, the wind lashed against the windows as though the world itself was mourning. The candles flickered violently, and for a fleeting second, the room seemed to hold its breath. Then it happened. A shudder passed through Albert's body, a final exhale that left his lips cold. His chest fell, and did not rise again. Victoria froze. Her world, her very soul, stopped. She pressed her ear to his chest, desperate for a sound, a heartbeat, a miracle. But there was nothing. Only silence. No, Albert, no. Her cry ripped through the chamber, raw and unrestrained. The queen collapsed over his still body, clinging to him as if sheer will could pull him back from the abyss. Servants wept silently in the doorway, and the doctors bowed their heads, powerless in the face of love and death. Time lost meaning. Victoria did not feel the cold seeping through her gown, nor did she hear the muted footsteps leaving the room to inform the waiting world. She only knew that the other half of her soul had been torn away. The empire could wait. The crown could tarnish. Nothing mattered. For hours she stayed there, holding the lifeless body of her beloved, whispering through trembling lips, "Come back to me. Please, come back." But the room answered only with silence, and the flames in the hearth burned lower, as if the castle itself had gone into mourning. When dawn finally came, it did not bring light. It brought a world forever changed. The mighty Queen of England, the ruler of an empire that spanned continents, had become a widow, lost in a darkness deeper than night. Chapter 4. The Widow of Windsor. The morning after Albert's death dawned in a colorless haze, as though the sun itself refused to shine over Windsor Castle. A thick frost covered the grounds, glinting like shards of broken glass under the weak light. The world outside was still, but inside the castle, grief pulsed like a living thing. Victoria did not rise to greet the day. She remained in the chamber that now felt like a tomb, her eyes swollen from tears that seemed endless. Her ladies-in-waiting hovered at a distance, unsure whether to speak or retreat, for the queen, once so commanding, now seemed fragile, like glass on the verge of shattering. When she finally stood, it was not as a monarch, but as a widow. Her black mourning dress swallowed her small frame, the heavy crepe veil falling over her pale face. Servants watched her descend the staircase in silence, her steps slow, deliberate, and heavy with the weight of the crown she no longer wished to bear. Albert's death had not just taken her husband, it had taken her light, the part of her that smiled freely and spoke with warmth. She had lost her confidant, her compass, the man who had tethered her to the living world. The queen ordered that Albert's rooms remain untouched. His boots stayed by the door, polished, and waiting for a man who would never wear them again. His books lay open on the table, as though he might return at any moment to finish reading. Every morning, servants aired the rooms, straightened the sheets, and laid out fresh towels as if he were alive. To outsiders, it was a morbid ritual. To Victoria, it was survival. She clung to his memory in every possible way. A lock of Albert's hair was sealed in a locket she wore against her heart. His dressing gown was draped across her chair so she could feel its weight as she wrote in her diary. In the evenings, she would place his photograph on the pillow beside her and whisper good night to it. Each gesture was both devotion and denial, a refusal to let the world move forward without him. As days bled into weeks, the castle became a mausoleum of love and grief. Black crepe draped over mirrors and doors, extinguishing any hint of joy. The echo of footsteps in the long corridors was now a constant reminder of emptiness. Even the sound of the wind through the ancient windows seemed to mourn. Victoria's court fell under the same shadow. Ministers entered her presence with heads bowed, speaking in whispers. The queen who once engaged passionately in state affairs now sat silent, her eyes drifting as if she were listening to someone they could not see. In her journals, she poured out her anguish. I am lost. My life as I knew it has ended. My beloved, my all in all, is gone. Without him, I am nothing but a broken heart. The British public at first wept with her. Church bells tolled in mournful unison, and black drapery lined the streets of London. Poets and newspapers called her the Widow of Windsor, a title that would follow her into history. But as weeks turned into months, sympathy gave way to unease. The Queen was vanishing from public life. She refused state appearances. She did not open Parliament. She turned away from the glittering halls of Buckingham Palace and retreated almost entirely to Windsor and Balmoral. seeking solace in solitude. Visitors described her as a shadow of the queen she once was, a woman draped in black, moving like a ghost through her own palaces. To some, it was a heartbreaking testament to love. To others, a dangerous withdrawal of the monarch from her people. Yet Victoria could not be moved. Every gesture, every choice was for Albert. She commissioned statues, portraits, and memorials in his honor. She filled her private rooms with his likeness, as if by surrounding herself with his image, she could keep death at bay. Even meals were served, with a place set for him. The chair left empty, a ritual both sacred and haunting. At night, the palace would fall into near silence, broken only by the tick of the great clock and the wind clawing at the windows. In those hours, Victoria would speak softly to the empty room, her voice trembling with both love and despair. "You are still with me, Albert," she whispered to the darkness. "I feel you. I will never stop loving you. Never." But the shadows did not answer. From that winter onward, the world would know her not as the young queen of romance and vitality, but as the eternal widow, a woman whose love was so fierce that it calcified into grief. She would reign for decades more, but the part of her that truly lived had been buried in December 1861, beside Prince Albert. This expanded version gives more atmosphere, psychological depth, and historical details to her transformation into the Widow of Windsor, while keeping the cinematic and haunting tone. If you want, I can now write Chapter 5 about how her lifelong mourning shaped the monarchy and her legacy, leading to her eventual return to public life. Chapter 5: A Crown in the Shadows. Years passed, but for Queen Victoria, time froze on December 14, 1861. The calendar turned, seasons changed, and the empire marched forward. Yet in her heart, she remained a widow in that dimly lit chamber at Windsor Castle. She'd become a living monument to grief. Black dresses became her uniform. Her jewels, once the glittering symbols of monarchy, were replaced by jet mourning stones. Even her face, once so expressive in laughter and youth, hardened into a mask of solemnity. The world called her the Widow of Windsor, and she embraced the name. Her mourning was not private. It became a national performance of devotion. Statues of Prince Albert rose across the kingdom. In London's Kensington Gardens, in Manchester, in Edinburgh. The grandest of them all, the Albert Memorial, loomed like a cathedral to eternal love. To the Queen, every brick and every carving was a plea to history. Remember him. Remember us. Inside the palaces, Albert's presence lingered in every room. His writing desk remained untouched, his clothes carefully maintained. Servants continued the rituals of his life, brushing his suits, setting out hot water for a shave, opening his windows to the morning air, because the Queen demanded the illusion that he was still among them. Yet while her love story became legend, her kingdom grew restless. Britain was entering the height of the Victorian era, an age of industry, empire, and change. But its queen was absent from public life. Parliament opened without her. Ceremonies went unattended. Politicians fretted, newspapers criticized, and whispers turned into anger. Some accused her of abandoning her people for the shadows of the past. "The Queen is in hiding," one London paper lamented. The people mourned with her, but the nation needs its sovereign. But Victoria could not be moved. Duty meant nothing compared to the chasm Albert had left behind. Her journal entries during those years revealed a woman, torn between the weight of the crown and the gravity of grief. The throne feels like a prison without my beloved. The people wish to see their queen, but I have no heart to give them. It was Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli who would later coax her back into the world. He understood her heart, appealing not to politics, but to love and memory. He reminded her that Albert would have wanted her to rule, not retreat, that to honor him, she must carry the empire they had built together. Slowly, cautiously, Victoria emerged. Her public appearances were infrequent, but they carried the weight of a living legend. When she finally rode through the streets of London again, crowds erupted in cheers, not just for their queen, but for a woman whose love story had touched the nation. Her grief had changed the monarchy. It became human, relatable, and intimate. For the first time, the public saw a sovereign not as a distant figure of authority, but as a wife, a mother, a widow. In her vulnerability, she forged a new bond with her people. Yet, even as the decades passed, her love never dimmed. She spoke to Albert in whispers, kept his photograph by her bed, and insisted that his memory guide her every decision. Her mourning had become more than personal. It had become the foundation of her reign. When the world looked at Queen Victoria, it no longer saw only a ruler. It saw the embodiment of devotion, a love so enduring that even death could not sever it. And in the quiet hours of the night, long after the empire slept, she still walked the silent halls of Windsor, whispering to the shadows, "I am still yours, Albert, forever." Chapter 6. Love Beyond the Grave. Decades passed, yet for Queen Victoria, the world remained divided into two eras, the time with Albert and the time without him. She had ruled for more than 60 years, longer than any monarch before her. The Victorian Empire stretched across continents, a global power that carried her name into history. Yet in her heart, she was never simply the queen of an empire. She was, until the end, the widow of one man. Every day of her life bore his shadow. She woke to his portrait, whispered to his memory, and carried his presence into every decision she made. Even as her children grew, married, and had children of their own, they lived under the unspoken law of Albert's memory. Every royal gathering, every family celebration was tinged with his absence. Victoria never remarried. She never even considered it. To her, love was not replaceable, and her marriage to Albert had been sacred, an unbroken thread that even death could not cut. In her private journals, she still referred to him as my angel, my life, my all. By the final years of her reign, she had transformed into a figure of legend, not just a monarch, but a symbol of devotion and endurance. When she appeared in public, frail and dressed entirely in black, crowds bowed in reverence, not merely to a queen, but to a woman who had carried love and loss longer than most could imagine. On the evening of January 22nd, 1901, Victoria lay in her bed at Osborne House, the winter sky darkening beyond the windows. The air in the room was quiet, heavy, almost sacred. Around her, the walls were lined with the memories of a life lived for love. Portraits of Albert, mementos of their marriage, letters he had written in a hand that had long turned to dust. As her breathing slowed, her hand rested upon a locket containing a lock of his hair, a ritual she had kept for 40 years. In her final moments, she whispered the name that had been her heartbeat and her anchor through every storm. Albert. And then, like a candle burning to its last flicker, Queen Victoria slipped away. her soul crossing into the only world where she longed to be, a world where Albert waited. The nation mourned the passing of a queen, but in truth, they were witnessing a reunion of two souls who had been separated for a lifetime. The bells of London tolled again, as they had 40 years before, but this time they rang not for sorrow, but for the closing of a love story that had defied the grave. In the end, Victoria's greatest legacy was not just her empire, her children, or the age that bore her name. It was the story of a love so enduring it became immortal. Even now, in the quiet corridors of Windsor Castle, in the hushed corners of Osborne House, and in the memorials she built for him, one can almost feel it. A queen's heart, still whispering across eternity, "I am yours, Albert, forever and always." The story of Queen Victoria is more than just a royal tragedy. It is a mirror reflecting the depths of human love and the weight of human loss. Victoria's life after Albert's death teaches us that grief is not linear, and love can transform into a lifelong shadow. Her devotion was beautiful and haunting. It became her strength, but also her prison. For 40 years, she lived as a monument to the past, proving that even a queen, the most powerful woman of her age, was ultimately a fragile human being, bound by the same emotions as us all. In our modern world, her story reminds us of three profound lessons. Love is timeless, but life must go on. Victoria's undying love inspires, yet her decades in mourning show the danger of letting the past consume the present. Grief is a testament to love, but healing requires us to keep living. Even the mighty are vulnerable. Behind the crown and the grandeur was a woman who felt the same emptiness and pain as any widow. Her story reminds us that power cannot shield the heart from loss. Legacy is built from love as much as achievement. Victoria left behind an empire and an era that bore her name. But what endures most in human memory is her love story, proof that even in history, emotion outlives authority. For us today, this tale whispers that we cannot escape sorrow, but we can choose how it shapes us. Love can be both an anchor and a chain. It is up to us to honor those we lose, not only by remembering them, but by continuing to live fully as they would have wanted. And so ends the story of Queen Victoria, a queen who ruled an empire but lived a lifetime as a widow of love. Her journey reminds us that behind every crown is a human heart, and even the strongest hearts can break. Love, grief, and memory. These are the threads that connect us across time. If this story touched you, please leave a like to honor the tale, share it with those who love history and human stories, and subscribe to Toutures and Secrets to uncover more forgotten truths and haunting legacies of the past. History is not just about dates and battles. It's about the hearts that once beat and the whispers they leave behind. Thank you for watching. See you in the next story.